Stop the Nazi games, indeed. Hallo allemaal, daar zijn we er weer. RHTVLive. Natuurlijk hebben we het over politiek en geopolitiek. En ja, eerst gaan we aanwijzen voor de internationale publiek waar we vandaan streamen. Ja, we streamen live vanuit Maastricht, het zuiden des lands. So we are streaming live from Maastricht, which is in the south of the Netherlands, right? And we're going to talk politics and geopolitics, of course. And first, we're going to look back on Thierry Baudet and our Prime Minister, right? About Syria. Yeah, there were questions about Syria. And Thierry Baudet asked who is supposed to win the Syrian war. And our Prime Minister says, well, it's a very complex situation. You know, this was when Turkey was bombing the north of Syria. And, you know, it's a very complex situation, but he is for a power vacuum. He doesn't say it that way, but he says we need to stabilize the situation, right? Stabilize the situation. Whilst the war in Syria was actually a proxy war trying to overthrow Assad. Remember? Obama and his red line, Brzezinski, who made ISIS. Remember this? So it's a frozen conflict right now. We have Israel bombing the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria, right? We have that going on. That is a wider war of the Gaza intervention, what Israel is doing, right? But first, we're going to take a look at Thierry Baudet and Mark Rutte, and we're going to show what has been said. Mensen, we gaan eerst even kijken naar Mark Rutte en Thierry Baudet. En ja, wie moet er winnen in Syrië? Nou, dat is een heel ander conflict, zoals eerder gezegd. Dus door proxies wordt het aangevallen. Kleine legertjes, daar heeft Nederland ook aan meegedaan. Debat hebben wij gesteund. En Thierry Baudet vraagt aan Mark Rutte, wie moet er winnen in Syrië?
Wie moet er in de ogen van de minister-president winnen in Syrië?
Winnen. Nou, wat wij willen is dat er een staakt het vuren komt, dat de Turken stoppen met deze aanval. En dan zal er natuurlijk in die regio overleg moeten komen. De situatie is natuurlijk uiterst ontvlambaar op dit moment. Die is deels al ontvlamd, omdat ook het Syrische regime heeft gezegd, wij gaan ons er ook mee bemoeien. Dat betekent dat er ook een betrokkenheid kan komen en die is deels zichtbaar van de Russen. De Turken natuurlijk die de aanval doen op dit moment op het Koerdisch gebied. Dus het belangrijkste nu is dat daar rust komt, dat de zaak gestabiliseerd wordt. In termen van winnen, ik denk dat...
So we need to stabilize the situation in Syria. And in terms of winning...
helemaal niemand hier kan winnen. Dat lijkt me...
Nobody can win. Right? No one can win this war. So this is a frozen conflict. The proxies are still in Syria, right? We have the Kurds who are being attacked by Turkey. We have Debat, what's left of that. The white helmets, right? We have all these other proxy groups trying to still overthrow Assad. But we have a larger war going on, which is the war in Ukraine, right? This is why it's a frozen conflict, frozen. Mensen, situatie in Syrië is een bevroren conflict. Er zijn nog wat proxies die achtergebleven zijn, die nog niet helemaal verslagen zijn. En dat gebeurt. Hè. Dat is een bevroren conflict. We hebben dus nu een conflict in Oekraïne. En we gaan zo even kijken naar wat onze minister-president zegt over Oekraïne. So we're gonna watch a video of what our prime minister had said about Ukraine, right? So that is also a proxy war, the war in Ukraine. And we also have Thierry Baudet asking him the serious questions, right? Who needs to win in Ukraine? That is the underlying question that Thierry Baudet is asking the prime minister, and he basically Thierry sees Ukraine as a vassal state of the U.S. And the prime minister says, no, that's not true. They're a neutral country, right? Yeah. So we all know Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt and the interference with the Bidens.
Ik hoorde net de minister-president zeggen dat hij gelooft dat deze oorlog te winnen is voor Oekraïne, zoals hij dat dan noemt, of voor het NAVO-blok. En ik vroeg mij toch af of de minister-president kan schetsen hoe hij dat dan voor zich ziet. Wat is dat dan? Hè? Dat Rusland helemaal verdreven wordt uit het voorheen Oekraïense grondgebied, inclusief de Krim. Acht de minister-president dat nou daadwerkelijk een realistisch scenario? Gaat dat daadwerkelijk in zijn idee ooit gebeuren?
Kijk, het antwoord op al deze vragen beginnen en eindigen altijd in Kiev. En uiteindelijk is er maar één club mensen, en dat is de Oekraïense regering, die kan besluiten wat het moment zou kunnen zijn dat men bereid is om met Moskou gesprekken te gaan voeren over het beëindigen van deze oorlog.
So Ukraine decides on when the war is done, according to our prime minister, right? Demissionary prime minister. So on the one hand, in Syria, he says, the situation is so unstable, we have to stabilize the situation. But he's not talking about Assad, right? And, that he can decide when the war is done, right? But over in Ukraine, our prime minister says, that's for Ukraine to decide when the war is done. We zagen net Syrië hebben aangehaald. Ja, dat is zo complex en bla 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 bla. Maar het ligt er niet aan de Syrische regering wanneer de oorlog op is gehouden. Dat is een heel ander proxyoorlog dan de oorlog in Oekraïne. Ja. In Syrië wordt er nog niet eens genoemd, Assad. Dat hij de eindbeslisser is wie dan vrede sticht en zoiets. Dat wordt nog niet eens genoemd. Dat is toch triest. Maar wat nog triester is het feit dat er toch ritueel misbruik wordt gepleegd in Nederland. Ja, dat is wel helemaal triest. So the sad thing about this is, right, that our prime minister says, the war in Syria, we're not going to solve that. No. We're not going to do anything about that. We're going to focus all our attention on Ukraine, and Ukraine needs to win. So what else is sad is that there is ritual abuse in the Netherlands, and that is a black page in our history, right? We don't like to talk about these subjects, but we do. And you know, there was this girl who was sexually abused, and she had a baby who was killed, and this and that, and high level people were involved in this. And we actually had the parliament saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to investigate this, right? There was this journalistic team, Argos, who was asking for all these victims of ritual abuse. And there were 140 victims. And then the parliament said, yeah, we need to investigate this. And the Justice Department says, we're going to investigate this. We're going to make our own team and this and that. But the people that have had ritual abuse say that the higher ups are in the Justice Department, right? This is why everything is being shoved under the rug.
Laat ik beginnen met opmerken dat ik zelf ook in eerste instantie veel twijfels heb gehad over dit onderwerp. Omdat de verhalen inderdaad zo gruwelijk zijn dat je het eigenlijk gewoon niet wil geloven. De hele Tweede Kamer, enkele partijen daar gelaten, die dus wel de motie steunden voor een onafhankelijk onderzoek.
In 2020?
In 2020.
Ja.
En vervolgens toch klakkeloos mee akkoord gingen dat dit onderzoek onder de totale controle van justitie plaatsvond. Ja. Aantekening bij plaatsen, een kanttekening. Je kunt iets aanvullen, maar je gaat niet zo'n heel dossier offline halen.
Dag beste kijkers, welkom bij Café Weltschmerz. Vandaag hebben we een heel serieus onderwerp. Een onderwerp dat zo verontrustend en zo weerzinwekkend is. En zo onvoorstelbaar dat veel mensen moeite hebben om het te geloven. Maar desondanks zijn er steeds meer aanwijzingen en ook steeds meer getuigenissen dat het daadwerkelijk voorkomt. En we gaan het vandaag hebben over georganiseerd, sadistisch, ritueel kindermisbruik. Het is een gevoelig onderwerp. Het kwam voor het eerst publiekelijk onder aandacht door het VPRO-programma Argos, dat er in 2018, 2019 en 2020 een programma over maakte. De makers hadden 140 getuigenverklaringen verzameld. En de meeste van de slachtoffers kenden elkaar niet, hadden elkaar nooit ontmoet. Maar die verklaringen die lieten toch een grote overlap zien, ook op detailniveau. En in oktober 22 stemde de voltallige Tweede Kamer in met een motie om tot een onafhankelijk onderzoek te komen. En we zijn nu 3,5 jaar verder. En ja, er is eigenlijk nog steeds geen steekhoudende conclusie. Vandaag heb ik het erover met Gideon van Meijeren. Gideon, welkom.
Dankjewel.
Kamerlid voor Forum voor Democratie, Tweede Kamer. Jij hebt je ontfermd over dit dossier. Ja, wat is er veranderd? Waarom is er ineens geen motivatie meer om dit te onderzoeken?
Ja, dat is...
So he's asking what has changed, right? The parliament said we need to investigate this. It went to Justice Department. And the Justice Department is stalling. And there basically was no investigation. There were people appointed for the investigation, right? And one of those people is, he's also very active in children, put it that way. And, he's the leading guy of the investigation. It's like, what the hell?
Het is inderdaad een hele terechte vraag. Laat ik beginnen met opmerken dat ik zelf ook in eerste instantie veel twijfels heb gehad over dit onderwerp. Omdat de verhalen inderdaad zo gruwelijk zijn dat je het eigenlijk gewoon niet wil geloven. Nou, die uitzendingen van Argos, die gaven toch echt wel heel duidelijk weer dat er wel degelijk een probleem is. Ze hebben dat heel zorgvuldig onderzocht. Zoals je zei, heel veel overlap tussen die verklaringen. Ze hebben ook ondersteunend...
So Argos, the journalistic team that was, investigating this, did their research. 140 victims who did not know each other and stuff like that. And this is just shoved under the rug. Nope, we're not going to look at that. Nope.
Bewijs gevonden, verklaringen van gynaecologen, artsen, traumapsychologen.
Ja, en ook een groep van 20
Proof of gynecologists, doctors, trauma specialists and stuff like that, you know.
behandelaars hè, vanuit, waar was het ook weer?
Ja, dat was een groep van GGZ-behandelaren die
ja.
onder andere ook slachtoffers bijstaan.
Ja.
Maar in die uitzendingen van Argos bleek ook dat die verhalen die daar gedaan waren ook echt ondersteund werden door forensisch bewijs. Zo was er bijvoorbeeld een meisje dat aangaf, ik ben verkracht, ik ben daarbij zwanger geraakt en ook bevallen van een babytje. En dat babytje zou zijn begraven. Dat werd niet geloofd door de politie. De zaak werd geseponeerd.
So 14, 15-year-old girl says, I got raped, right? And she got pregnant and she got a kid who was killed, buried and stuff. You know, it's like, what the hell, man? Really? Is dit nou echt Nederland? Echt waar? Zit ik niet in een aflevering van de Twilight Zone? Ja. We weten hoe het eraan toe gaat in Nederland. Hoe groot de doofpot is. We hebben nog altijd de heer Demming die op vrije voeten rondloopt. Geen echt onderzoek naar geweest. En zoiets allemaal. En dan hebben we ook nog een onderzoekscommissie geleid door iemand die dan zijn handen niet van kinderen af kan laten. Het is onvoorstelbaar. Het stinkt in Den Haag.
Vervolgens is Argos op onderzoek uitgegaan en toen zijn ze bijvoorbeeld gynaecologen, die hebben ze aan het woord gelaten, die dat meisje hebben onderzocht, onder narcose, een onderzoek hebben gedaan en konden bevestigen dat zij inderdaad rond haar 14e levensjaar is bevallen van een baby.
Ja,
niemand wist waar dat baby was. Ja, zo zijn er nog tal van gruwelijke details die heel erg aannemelijk werden gemaakt. En dat leidde tot verontwaardiging in de politiek.
Ja.
Omdat die verhalen zo afschuwelijk waren. Eigenlijk kon niemand eromheen dat hier iets mee moest gebeuren.
So everyone within Parliament was like, we need to investigate this. As I've said before, right? So this is all happening in the Netherlands, right? This is the cover-up. You know, you're not allowed to talk about these subjects. Otherwise, maybe you'll get criminal prosecution or whatever. You'll be labeled as disinformation, whatever. You know, it's like, oh my God, really? Really? And we have someone from Germany, Uwe Fries, who says, what the hell is going on? Now the Netherlands sending the refugees to Germany to attack children with a knife. I'm sorry, it's not me. It's not me. You know, I do not want that refugee to come to the Netherlands and go to Germany to stab some kids. You know, it's like, oh my God, man. Really? Really? Ja, mensen, dit gebeurt. Dus een vluchteling gaat vanuit Nederland naar Duitsland toe om een paar kinderen even neer te steken en dit en dat. We horen het van Uwe Fries, die dus in Duitsland is. So I'm very sorry, you know, but it's not me. It's my government destabilizing my country, using these refugees. Who knows where they're from? Maybe they're from ISIS or whatever group, you know, and who knows? Who knows? Over here in the Netherlands, it's, oh, come on over. Come on over. We don't care who you are. So this is all happening in the Netherlands. And above all this, we have child abuse in the Netherlands, ritual abuse, satanic ritual abuse, and stuff like that. You know, it's piling on. Yeah, piling on. So, you know, I want a world of peace. That's what I want, right? There aren't many presidents that I admire, but there is one president who spoke truth and used that truth, and he was assassinated, of course, and we're going to take a look at President John F. Kennedy, who made a very important speech about peace. Ja, we gaan even kijken naar president Kennedy, die het over vrede heeft. No Pax Americana.
President Anderson, members of the faculty, Board of Trustees, distinguished guests, my old colleague, Senator Bob Byrd, who has earned his degree through many years of attending Knight Law School, while I am earning mine in the next 30 minutes, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pride that I participate in this ceremony of the American University, sponsored by the Methodist Church, founded by Bishop John Fletcher Hurst, and first opened by President Woodrow Wilson in 1914. This is a young and growing university, but it has already fulfilled Bishop Hurst's enlightened hope for the study of history and public affairs in a city devoted to the making of history and to the conduct of the public's business. By sponsoring this institution of higher learning for all who wish to learn, whatever their color or their creed, the Methodists of this area and the nation deserve the nation's thanks. And I commend all those who are today graduating. Professor Woodrow Wilson once said that every man sent out from a university should be a man of his nation as well as a man of his time. And I'm confident that the men and women who carry the honor of graduating from this institution will continue to give from their lives, from their talents, a high measure of public service and public support. There are few earthly things more beautiful than a university, wrote John Masefield in his tribute to English universities, and his words are equally true today. He did not refer to towers or to campuses. He admired the splendid beauty of a university because it was, he said, a place where those who hate ignorance may strive to know, where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see. I have therefore chosen this time and place to discuss a topic on which ignorance too often abounds and the truth too rarely perceived, and that is the most important topic on earth, peace. What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time. I speak of peace because of the new face of war. Total war makes no sense in an age where great powers can maintain large and relatively invulnerable nuclear forces and refuse to surrender without resort to those forces. It makes no sense in an age where a single nuclear weapon contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied air forces in the Second World War. It makes no sense in an age when the deadly poisons produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the globe and to generations yet unborn. Today, the expenditure of billions of dollars every year on weapons acquired for the purpose of making sure we never need them is essential to the keeping of peace. But surely the acquisition of such idle stockpiles, which can only destroy and never create, is not the only, much less the most efficient, means of assuring peace.
These are things that are run through history, right? We need peace. That is what we need. No more war. We've had enough war, right? Now, if you've been following RHTVLive, we've been talking about the Balkan War, right? The 3 Balkan Wars. And now we're at the 3rd Balkan War, and we're going to explain what happened right before World War I. The 3rd Balkan War.
The next one, and it will be.
We got to go back. There we go. The 3rd Balkan War.
Even though after the First and the Second Balkan Wars, there wasn't another isolated conflict in the Balkans. In the year of 1914, the First World War started, exactly in the same region, which was marked by war, conflict, and political turmoil. And because you are our subscriber, you should definitely check out our sponsor over at Squarespace. This incredible website builder includes so many features, like easy link to all social media platforms, support for podcasts, integrated analytics, nor the Second Balkan War fix the issues of those countries living in the region. As we talked about the Balkan conflicts in our previous videos, the long centuries of Ottoman hegemony over other diverse Christian people, and the geographic position between the 3 powers, Russia, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire, put the Balkans at the crossroads of interests and conflicts. And when the nations freed themselves, there was even more conflict, leading to the First, then to the Second regional wars, and also marking and influencing the start of the First World War. Thus, we named the Balkan theater of the First World War as the 3rd Balkan War. The domino effect of history, as we call it, was incredibly well felt in this space. Every event affected the next one, and it will be felt even in the Second World War. Knowing all this, even if an isolated war didn't happen here, we can say there was a 3rd Balkan conflict based on the same frustrations and on the outcome of the second one. But this 3rd war was incorporated in a much larger world war. In the aftermath of the Balkan Wars, Bulgarian opinion turned against Russia and the Western powers, whom the Bulgarians felt had done nothing to help them. The government aligned Bulgaria with Germany and Austria-Hungary, even though this meant also becoming an ally of the Ottomans, Bulgaria's traditional enemy. But Bulgaria now had no claims against the Ottomans, but against Serbia, Greece, and Romania. Bulgaria, recuperating from the Balkan Wars, sat out the first year of World War I. Ottoman entry into World War I was the result of 2 recently purchased ships of its navy, still manned by their German crews and commanded by their German admiral, carrying out the Black Sea raid on the 29th of October, 1914. There were a number of factors that conspired to influence the Ottoman government and encourage them into entering the war. The reason for joining the war on Germany's side is debated, knowing that the Ottoman Empire was an agricultural weakened state in an age of industrial warfare. Also, the economic resources of the empire were shortened by the cost of the Balkan Wars, so the reasons are not immediately clear. The Serbs never reconciled with the idea of annexing Bosnia and Herzegovina by Austria. In late June 1914, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne...
As you can see, it's all about geopolitics. right? Who has the most land, who has control over that land, and this and that. This is why wars are waged, right? This is one of the reasons why, there are many, many reasons. We have a war in Sudan, right, which is a year long, year and some months long, and that is all about the minerals they have. They have gold. This is why Russia is financing their war in Ukraine with gold they get from Sudan. This is why Russia and China had made a deal with the Houthis, right? So, but that's another subject, and we're going to take a look at this.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie arrived on a visit. Being in a car, an assassination attempt.
Now, you may ask, why are you showing this? We need to understand history before we can repeat it.
Was made and was unsuccessful. But afterwards, a Serbian extremist, Gavrilo Princip, stepped up to the footboard of the car and shot Franz Ferdinand and Sophie at point-blank range. He was one of 6 members of a network coordinated by Danilo Ilic, who had the Black Hand Pan-Slavic organization behind him. The assassination led to a diplomatic maneuvering between the great powers called the July Crisis. Austria-Hungary correctly believed that Serbian officials were involved in the plot to murder Archduke. On the 23rd of July, Austria-Hungary delivered to Serbia the July Ultimatum, a series of 10 demands that were made intentionally unacceptable. This was clearly an effort to provoke a war with Serbia. Serbia decreed general mobilization after 2 days and accepted all the terms of the ultimatum except for the demand that Austrian delegates be allowed in Serbia to take part into the investigation of the assassination. Following this, Austria-Hungary broke off diplomatic relations with Serbia and the next day ordered a partial mobilization. Finally, on the 28th of July 1914, a month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia, prepared for war, ordered general mobilization. German Chancellor, for an appropriate response, Kaiser Wilhelm II asked his cousin Tsar Nicholas II to suspend the Russian general mobilization. When he refused, Germany issued an ultimatum demanding its mobilization be stopped, and a commitment not to support Serbia, knowing that Russian involvement in the war will attract Germany to defend its ally, Austria-Hungary. Another was sent to France, asking her not to support Russia if it were to come to the defense of Serbia. On the 1st of August, after the Russian response, Germany mobilized and declared war on Russia. Austria-Hungary mobilized 239 battalions, 516 pieces of artillery in 3 armies against Serbia. The 2nd Army, the 5th with around 80,000 men, and the 6th Army with around 60,000 men. The participation in this campaign for the 2nd was insignificant, and she was transferred to Galicia, and the Austrian numbers will grow. Serbia deployed 4 armies on the ground, with 247,000 troops, and Montenegro mobilized 6 divisions. The Austrian army surpassed the armies of its Balkan enemies in all respects: troops, armaments, and military equipment. But even so, the defense and courage of the Serbian-Montenegrin armies spoke for itself. Austria invaded and fought the Serbian army at the Battle of Sir and Battle of Kolubara, beginning on the 12th of August. Over the next 2 weeks, Austrian attacks were thrown back with heavy losses, which marked the first major Allied victories of the war and dashed Austro-Hungarian hopes of a swift victory. Austria-Hungary could only spare 1/3 of its army to attack Serbia. After suffering heavy losses, the Austrians briefly occupied the Serbian capital, Belgrade. A Serbian counterattack in the Battle of Kolubara succeeded in driving them from the country by the end of 1914. For the first 10 months of 1915, Austria-Hungary used most of its military reserves to fight Italy. German and Austro-Hungarian diplomats, however, scored a coup by persuading Bulgaria to join the attack on Serbia. When Germany promised to restore the boundaries of the Treaty of San Stefano, Bulgaria, which had the largest army in the Balkans, declared war on Serbia in October 1915. Britain, France, and Italy then declared war on Bulgaria. Bulgaria declared war on Serbia on the 12th of October 1915 and joined in the attack by the Austro-Hungarian army under Mackenson's army of 250,000 that was already underway. Serbia was conquered in a little more than a month, as the Central Powers, now including Bulgaria, sent in 600,000 troops total.
Can you imagine that? 600,000 people all having a gun and you know, boots and whatever equipment they have, fighting all over this. Right? It's like, what? Really? You know, you have your country, be happy with what you have, right? Stop invading each other.
The Serbian army, fighting on two fronts and facing certain defeat, retreated into northern Albania. The Serbs suffered defeat in the Battle of Kosovo. Montenegro covered the Serbian retreat towards the Adriatic coast in the Battle of Moj Kovac in the 6th to 7th of January 1916. But ultimately, the Austrians also conquered Montenegro. The surviving Serbian soldiers were evacuated to Greece. After conquest, Serbia was divided between Austro-Hungary and Bulgaria. In late 1915, a Franco-British force landed at Salonika in Greece to offer assistance and to pressure its government to declare war against the Central Powers. However, the pro-German King Constantine I dismissed the pro-Allied government of Eleftherios Venizelos before the Allied expeditionary force arrived. The friction between the King of Greece and the Allies continued to accumulate with the National Schism, which effectively divided Greece between regions still loyal to the king and the new provisional government of Venizelos in Thessaloniki. At the end of 1915, Serbia and Montenegro were fully occupied by the Central Powers. Due to this, the front line was continuous from Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and the link between the Ottomans, Bulgarians, Austrians, and Germans was established. The German High Command, whose troops represented the main military force of the Central Powers, did not plan any large-scale offensive on the Thessaloniki front, in part because of its limited strength, but also because of logistical difficulties. The purpose was to control enemy troops in the region with the help of small German-Bulgarian troops, and to focus more against the Russians and the French. In May 1916, the Entente forces of the Thessaloniki front enjoyed numerical superiority over German-Bulgarian troops. The Entente's troops were supplemented by those of the completely reorganized Serbian army. The Serbs had formed 6 infantry and 1 cavalry divisions, placed under the nominal command of Crown Prince. The Serbian army had 130,000 troops, and the total Allied forces in the Balkans reached 300,000. In the meantime, from the 17th of February 1915 to the 9th of January 1916, the Entente powers, Britain, France, and Russia, sought to weaken the Ottoman Empire, one of the Central Powers, by taking control of the straits that provided a supply route to Russia. An attack was made on Ottoman forts at the entrance of the Dardanelles in February 1915, and was followed by an amphibious landing on the Gallipoli Peninsula in April 1915 to capture the Ottoman Straits and then take control of Constantinople. But this was in the end a costly defeat for the Entente powers. When the German command decided to transfer troops from the Balkans to the French front, the Entente troops were tasked with stopping the relocation of enemy forces by launching offensive actions. In the wake of Allied attacks, the Germans continued to send troops from the Balkans to the Western Front, and the remaining Bulgarian units in the region remained relatively passive. Also in the north of the Danube, the Kingdom of Romania was neutral for the first 2 years of the war. King Karl I was an ethnic German from the same royal family that ruled the German Empire, and thus favored Germany. But after his death in 1914, his nephew, the new King Ferdinand, also from the same royal family, decided to join the Entente, due to the public opinion that was more inclined to France, but mainly due to the highest priority of Romania, that was to unite with Transylvania, which had Romanians as the major ethnic group. The Allies wanted Romania to join its side in order to cut the rail communications between Germany and Turkey, and to shift the balance of power in the region. Britain made loans, France set a military training mission, and Russia promised modern munitions. The Allies promised at least 200,000 soldiers to defend Romania against Bulgaria to the south, and help it invade Austria. On the night of August 27, 1916, 3 Romanian armies, 1st, 2nd, and Northern Army, deployed according to the Romanian campaign plan, the Z hypothesis, launched the Battle of Transylvania through the Carpathians, while the 3rd Army protected the south across Danube. In a short time, many towns were captured, and the Romanian army advanced rapidly. But within weeks, sizable reinforcements began arriving at the scene. 8 German divisions and an Alpine Corps were deployed under the command of Erich von Falkenhayn, and other Austria-Hungarian divisions arrived. The Entente's military actions gained momentum in August. Anglo-French units tried to break through the Bulgarian defense in the Dodrin Lake region. The Bulgarians managed to repel the attack, inflicting heavy losses on their enemies. After Romania entered the war, the Entente planned a combined offensive, which aimed to get Bulgaria out of the war. The offensive was to begin on August 20th. The Bulgarian command took it before the Allies and launched its own offensive on August 17th. The Bulgarian attack targeted heavily populated regions of Greece. But until the end of the year, no major changes on the Greek-Macedonian front line happened. Attacked from the south by Germans and Bulgarians, and from the west across Carpathians, in the next months, Romania suffered high losses and lost more than 60% of its territory. Romanian forces became too strained to put up effective resistance against the enemy advance. Romania had to fight on 2 1,600-kilometer-long battlefields, the longest front in Europe, with a varied configuration and diverse geographical elements. Because of this situation, the offensive against Bulgaria didn't start. On the 2nd of July 1917, after pressures made by the Entente countries, Greece joined the war against the Central Powers. Even though the majority of the country was conquered, Romania didn't capitulate, and in early July 1917, on the Romanian front, one of the largest concentrations of combat forces and war material assembled during World War I, a total of 9 armies, 80 infantry divisions with 974 battalions, 19 cavalry divisions with 550 squadrons, and 923 artillery batteries, whose effectives amounted to some 800,000 men, with about 1 million in their immediate reserve. The 3 great battles, decisive for the Romanian nation's destiny, delivered at Marashti, Marasheshti, and Oituz, stopped the Central Powers' advance, and represented a turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. These battles were fought approximately on the front alignment, stabilized in early 1917. Romanian forces, together with the Russians, resisted on that front line. But in November 1917, due to the revolution in Russia, the Russian army became unorganized, and the new Russian government signed a peace agreement with Central Powers. Thus, even though Romania resisted on the front line for around a year, they were encircled and an armistice was forced on them. The military-political situation in the Balkans since the beginning of 1918 has changed in favor of the Entente. However, from the beginning of 1917, calm prevailed along the entire length of the front, and the fighting was of low intensity. The Entente forces occupied a 350-kilometer front in the south, and was ready to launch a full offensive, taking profit off the fact that many German troops switched to the Western Front struggle against the French, British, and the new Entente power, the United States. Allied military operations began on the morning of September 14th, and in the next days, the offensive had a success. During this period, the Bulgarian army was ravaged by rebellions, and about 30,000 soldiers refused to fight. The government in Sofia, given the desperate situation in which the army found itself, did everything in its power to speed up the negotiation process for signing an armistice. The armistice between the Entente and Bulgaria was signed on September 29th, 1918, in Thessaloniki. The Entente force advanced and in Serbia and in Bulgaria, and when 2 divisions reached Romania, the Romanian government cancelled the armistice agreement and entered in the war for the second time against the Central Powers. Meanwhile, the Allied advance, the Arab revolts that happened, and the developments in Southeast Europe squashed the Ottoman government's hopes. Seeking peace, on the 30th of October 1918, the Armistice of Mudros was signed. At that point, the Ottoman state was bankrupt and in turmoil. This will be the end of the Ottoman Empire. After the liberation of Serbian territory, the Entente troops prepared for the invasion of Austria-Hungary. Also, large turmoil started to exist in the empire, mainly due to so many different ethnicities that existed and the unfavorable war situation. Under these conditions, the Vienna government asked the Allies on October 27th to accept the start of separate peace negotiations. On October 29th, Austrians accepted all the conditions of peace imposed by the Entente. After this, the Austrian-Hungary Empire will collapse. Soon after, on November 11th, 1918, Germany signed an armistice. We called this video the Third Balkan War, not because it was an isolated war, but because the developments in World War I in the region were a consequence of the previous Balkan Wars. The instability of the region created the flame that ignited the war in Bosnia, and the end of this war will ignite the hate and frustration that will start a bigger war 21 years later. This war ended the multi-secular monarchies of Austria, Ottomans, and Russia that fought over the Balkans for centuries. It was the final nail in the coffin for the monarchies that fought over and subjugated the Balkan ethnicities. But the frustration and conflict was not done yet.
So now we all know what happened during the Balkan Wars, right? That was explained pretty, all the animation and stuff like that. I couldn't have said it better, So we've had enough war. Yet our Prime Minister, who had said there's going to be no money going to Greece, right? We remember the Greek debt crisis, right? No money goes to Greece, and we paid thousands, millions of euros towards Greece, even though Greece never got that money. They're still in debt. So our Prime Minister said there are no Dutch kids going to war, right? Nope. But if we look at this post here on Facebook, we see 17-year-olds are called for the army every kid who is 17 or will be 17 will get a letter, from the army where Defense Minister Kasia Olongre says that she can call up people when there is a war, right? But we are in war. We're in war with Ukraine. So this is one of those media spins, right? We're not in a war. It's no war in the Netherlands. Nope, nothing going on here. Just like the rituals and stuff like that, they're buried under the carpet. But we are in war, right? This is Orwellian newspeak and this and that, The war is not meant to be won. It's meant to be continuous, right? So 17-year-olds are probably going to Ukraine. So, and I already talked about this months ago, right? And no, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're a wacko conspiracy theorist, Rogier. Je weet niet waar je het over hebt. Zoiets allemaal. Ik weet wel waar ik het over heb. I know what I'm talking about. We are dealing with criminals, right? So, this is all basically background because, we also look forward and we know that Damascus was hit by an Israeli rocket, right? The Iranian consulate over there in Damascus was hit. And this is very, very dangerous because this means diplomats are also targets, right? So this is escalating the war, and I wish Russia would, hurry up with their military base in the Golan Heights so you can stop Israeli rockets hitting Syrian targets, right? We know that Iran was invited by the Syrian government because they were attacked by proxies, right? Small armies attacking Damascus and trying to overthrow Assad, right? This is one phase of a proxy war. Use small armies to overthrow a country. Another phase of a proxy war is have a neutral country ask the defense, right, NATO, to intervene. That's another part of a proxy war, right? So what happened in Ukraine 2014, the government was overthrown and Yanukovych had fled to Moscow and still is in Moscow, I believe. And the EU installed a new government under Poroshenko, now Zelensky. Now the east of Ukraine said, we're not going to take part of this, right? We are autonomous regions and this and that. So this is why Kiev is trying to take over the regions. And this is why Russia is protecting those regions, right? Those autonomous regions, such as Kharkiv and Mariupol and, eastern parts, Luhansk, Donetsk, and stuff. Here we have Luhansk, Kharkiv. So this is all happening, and the battlefield is fluctuating, right? First the Russians take over a part of the country, and then they go back. And when they go back, they put out barbed wire and make trenches and stuff like that. And then they go to the defensive line and wait until Ukraine attacks, basically. This is how you are in offense whilst you're in defense, right? This is tactical warfare here, man. And it's all about, basically about the Black Sea. Who has control over the Black Sea, right? There's another port in Odessa, and, you know, Ukraine used to have Sevastopol, Crimea, and, you know, now they don't, because they said, we're going to have a referendum, which is a swear word within the European Union. We remember what happened in Spain. They also had a referendum. Catalonia also had a referendum. And those people were beat into pulp and stuff like that. It's really horrific. But, you know, Crimea said, we're going to take part with Russia. We don't want to be part of Ukraine anymore. And now Russian ships are being bombed at and stuff like that. The Ukrainians use small speedboats, and you have very large Russian ships, right? So it's very hard to detect. So this is all happening, right? It's all about the control of the Black Sea. So, you know, there's a lot happening in the world, and we need to have a revolution, in my opinion, right? Not only the revolution of mind, but we also need to act. We also need to do something, right? So we're going to take a look at an article. Israel, U.S. believe Iran is about to retaliate for the Israeli bombing. And we're going to take a look at that article. Wait, where is it? I got to search. There it is. Israel and the U.S. believe Iran is about to retaliate for Israel bombing of Syria consulate, officials say. So we talked about the Israeli strike, right? And they basically believe, the CIA and the Mossad basically believe that there's a 48-hour window where Iran will attack within the 48 hours, you know? So this is all happening. Who knows what's going to happen, right? But the Iranians are not sitting back. And, you know, Soleimani was killed by Donald Trump. We will never forget this, right? He was just droned when he was in Baghdad, and executive powers, right? Just one autograph and that's it. And the general is killed, and Iraqi general and some officials were killed or wounded, right? So we do not want a Pax Americana. You know, John F. Kennedy was right. We do not need this. We know how NATO came to be, right? I showed you guys that. And people tend to forget. So we're going to show again how to prevent World War III, or how to stop World War III, right? We have a very beautiful young lady who's going to explain how NATO came to be. Very, very interesting for the people who have missed it. Here, how to stop World War III.
To abandoning their loyalties to the rising.
Oh, first we got to go back. Here we have this beautiful lady, Abby Martin, investigative journalist. Yeah, I like to wake up next to her, huh? Yeah. Hope she's single. Anyway, she's going to explain how NATO came to be.
First Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, once quipped that the goal of the alliance was to keep the Soviets out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. Today, the Soviets are out, the US seems here to stay, and the Germans seem weaker by the day. Has NATO achieved its goals? If so, why does it still exist? And why did Fidel Castro call it the most perfidious instrument of repression known to mankind? To answer these questions, we look back at the organization's history in Europe and beyond, and consider why a defensive alliance might end up causing World War III. NATO emerged in the wake of some of the most turbulent events in human history. The world was reeling from a global war, and the geopolitical balance of power was undergoing a tectonic transformation. The Soviet Union lost 27 million lives to defeat Nazi Germany. China lost over 20 million in a much longer war against the Japanese Empire. The British had been blitzed, their colonies starved, partitioned, and abandoned. Europe was in ruins. The United States, on the other hand, emerged economically stronger, and after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, shielded by the terrible power of the atom. It moved quickly to apply its newfound power to a project of global hegemony. Preponderant power must be the object of US policy, a State Department memo said in 1947. NATO was a critical piece of that puzzle. Founded in 1949 with the explicit mission of deterring Soviet expansionism and establishing a permanent North American presence on the continent. But NATO was not the only US military treaty signed after World War II, and the other treaties reveal a lot about the real motivation behind NATO's creation. These included the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, or SEATO, and the Central Treaty Organization, or CENTO. Each was part of a grand strategy of economic and military encirclement and containment of communism. NATO insists that it's a force for democracy, but from its inception, it has armed, protected, and elevated some of the most reactionary forces in European society. In fact, the ashes of World War II had not yet settled in Europe, and the US was already busy rehabilitating fascists all around the continent. Antonio Salazar's brutal Estado Novo regime in Portugal was a founding member of NATO and remained a core member until it was toppled in 1974. Adolf Heusinger, a senior Nazi officer and close ally of Hitler wanted by the Soviet Union for war crimes, would become chairman of its military committee. Not many people remember the violence that swept across Europe in these years. Through initiatives like Operation Gladio, the United States funded what it called stay-behind operations across the continent, cultivating a clandestine paramilitary network ready to strike at and disable the rising popular movements sweeping Europe. From 1948 onwards, the CIA funneled tens of millions of dollars to extremist right-wing groups in Italy alone. These groups were responsible for scores of deadly terrorist attacks that massacred hundreds, many of which were blamed on the left. These, according to a 2000 parliamentary commission in Italy, were part of a strategy of tension that terrorized people into abandoning their loyalties to the rising communist and socialist movements, intended in particular to stop the Italian Communist Party, and to a certain degree also the Italian Socialist Party, from reaching executive power in the country. US activities extended far beyond Italy. The Corsican gang that led the French Connection, a notorious drug smuggling scheme that delivered most of the US's heroin, also received CIA support to prevent the rise of communist forces in France, as did Turkey's brutal Grey Wolves, and Portugal's Central Order and Tradition, and Greece's military junta. The list goes on. NATO's mandate derived explicitly from the threat posed by the Soviet Union, and the rising popularity of communism outside of the USSR fell within its purview. As an instrument of US hegemony, NATO could not withstand the rise of an anti-imperialist politics within its domain. And the case of Italy reveals the indivisibility of NATO's process and the broader aims of US empire. NATO insists that it's a guarantor of freedom, but we don't have to look far back to find its fingerprints in attempts to crush popular aspirations for sovereignty. Fighting for liberation from Portuguese colonialism, the Bissau-Guinean revolutionary Amilcar Cabral described the weapons that flowed into Africa through the alliance, supporting the Salazar regime's wars against the people of Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, and Cabo Verde. NATO is the USA. We have captured in our country many US weapons. NATO is the Federal Republic of Germany. We have a lot of Mauser rifles taken from Portuguese soldiers. NATO, for the time being at least, is France. In our country, there are Alouette helicopters. NATO is, too, to a certain extent, the government of the Italian people. We have captured from the Portuguese machine guns and grenades made in Italy. If NATO was designed to stop the spread of communism, then the stirrings of sovereignty that rang through the colonized world would also come under attack. Pointing at NATO's support of the Salazar regime, Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru condemned the alliance at the 1955 Bandung Conference, calling it one of the most powerful protectors of colonialism. Virtually the whole of North Africa was turned into a sphere of operations for NATO, wrote Walter Rodney in his seminal book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Time and time again, the evidence points to the cynical use of Africa to buttress capitalism economically and militarily, and therefore, in effect, forcing Africa to contribute to its own exploitation. That process has not ended. Today, for example, NATO's arsenal is wielded to grind away at the Western Saharan people's aspirations for self-determination, just as it arms Israel's genocidal occupation of Palestine. NATO insists that its goal is to safeguard its members, but it is clear that NATO operates in the interests of its most powerful member, the United States. When the US won the Cold War and the Warsaw Pact disbanded, it seemed that NATO's mission, too, would come to an end. In November 1990, the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe adopted the Charter of Paris for a new Europe. This historic document, now largely forgotten, asserted that the era of confrontation and division of Europe has ended. It promised that future relations would be founded on respect and cooperation. But as Europe and the Soviet Union planned to establish a new security model across the Eurasian landmass, the US was preparing for a new era of hegemony. We can't let the Soviets clutch victory from the jaws of defeat, George H.W. Bush told Germany's Helmut Kohl in 1990. Later that year, he told France's François Mitterrand that no organization would replace NATO as the guarantor of Western security and stability.
This is when they expanded, they went eastward. Well, they said, we're not going eastward. Yep. So this is pretty interesting. So we're going to show all of this. And it's also very interesting, Jacobin, right? We know the French Revolution. We know who took power over there. But we also know the English Revolution that was also under the same name.
In this way, Bush set the stage for NATO expansion, against the so-called ironclad guarantees promised by US Secretary of State James Baker to Soviet Foreign Minister Eduard Shevardnadze in Moscow in 1990 that NATO's forces would not move eastward of the German border. The motivations behind these moves became clear with the leak of the Wolfowitz Doctrine in 1992. Our first objective, the document said, is to prevent the reemergence of a new rival, either on the territory of the former Soviet Union or elsewhere. The Wolfowitz Doctrine, which also laid the groundwork for preemptive military intervention, was later revised by Vice President Dick Cheney and General Colin Powell and became the policy of President George W. Bush, leaving a trail of death and sorrow across the Middle East. But NATO was just as useful among its aspiring members. Take Poland. On the 25th of March, 1997, then Senator Joe Biden arrived in Warsaw to address the conference of the Euro-Atlantic Association. In his speech, Biden outlined the conditions for Poland's accession to NATO. I believe that large state-owned enterprises should also be placed in the hands of private owners, so that they can be operated with an economic rather than political interests in mind, he said. Businesses like banks, the energy sector, the state airline, the state copper producer, and the telecommunications monopoly will have to be privatized. Membership in NATO thus dictated that states surrender the very basis of their economic sovereignty, while drawing them into the sprawling US military-industrial complex through the purchase of NATO standard equipment. Billions of dollars are at stake in the next global arms bazaar, the New York Times wrote in 1997, citing weapons sales to Central European nations invited to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. In one of its most blatantly ridiculous claims, NATO insists that it's a defensive alliance. But through the course of its history, NATO has destroyed and dismantled entire states. The Libyan War saw open-air slave markets reappear in a country that once had Africa's highest human development index. In turn, Libya's destruction fueled militancy and conflict beyond Libya in Mali, Algeria, Niger, and elsewhere in the Sahel region. According to research carried out by the Costs of War Project at Brown University's Watson Institute, the post-9/11 wars that have been imposed on the peoples of Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya, and Somalia have claimed 4.5 million lives and forced tens of millions into poverty and involuntary migration. Many of those who then pursue the perilous path to peace are held up at NATO's borders, drowned in the Mediterranean, the world's largest graveyard, or disappeared into concentration camps funded by NATO member states across northern Africa. From the major US post-war military treaties, only NATO remains. SEATO and CENTO are no more. One was disbanded when the US was defeated by the revolutionary forces in Vietnam, and the other after the Iranian Revolution. Yet NATO persists, not least because it's proven its repeated willingness to use overwhelming military violence against its adversaries. Now, having expanded as far east as it can go in Europe, NATO has set its sights on the world. NATO's recent strategic concept referred to Africa and the Middle East as its southern neighborhood. And at its 2023 summit in Vilnius, NATO issued a communique that doubled down on the organization's strategic posture outlined previously. China's stated ambitions challenge NATO's interests, security, and values, necessitating a NATO pivot from the Atlantic to the Pacific. You see, NATO is an anachronism. It emerged as an instrument of division and conquest, just as humanity was preparing to put violent domination behind it and welcome a new era of human cooperation. Principles outlined in the UN Charter, a document adopted with unprecedented consensus. Now, as NATO's expanding ambitions raise tensions to a boiling point on several fronts, it has become imperative to challenge its violent mission and dismantle the war machine. This is how we prevent World War III.
That's what we want. We want to prevent World War III from happening, right? And maybe Wanda is right, you know. Maybe only aliens can come and save our planet. Who knows? Who knows? We need to understand the situation and, you know, we need to understand what's happening. We hebben zo net gezien hoe NATO tot stand kwam oud-nazi's en operatie Gladio en noem het allemaal maar op. Ja. De oorlogsmachine moet ophouden. The war machine must stop. Right? This is what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent 17-year-old kids going to Ukraine. Right? I hope someone listens, because last time I warned people not to take the flu shot. No, not the flu shot. The shot, right? Don't do that. Nope, government lies to you. Lots of people still took the shot. So, let's see this comment here. It's not the bulwark against communism anymore. Now, there is this global bulwark, right? The United Nations, which is basically the world government, and they want control over Russia and China and Iran. These three countries are not cooperating with what they want. So this is all happening. And, now there are missiles coming from North Korea into Russia against Ukraine, right? This is all happening. It's not, I'm not, thinking this up, I'm just following what's happening in the news. So we see that 9/11 was supposed to be a footprint for American hegemony in the Middle East, but that failed. We see that Syria failed, right? We see Afghanistan failed. We see Libya failed. And now we see Ukraine, and they are failing. They're putting 17-year-olds, Ukrainians, at the front line, cannon fodder. And when they are dead, right, then maybe the Germans, or maybe Poland, or Romania, or whatever other country. France had already sent 2,000 troops towards Ukraine. England also had sent troops to Ukraine. So, how long do you want to prolong this war? Right? Because Russia is a lot bigger than all these other countries here. So, anyway, we're also going to take a look at what's happening in New York, right? There was an earthquake in New York, a very rare event. And let's see if we can find here. Magnitude 4.8 in New York, the tri-state area. So we're going to take a look at some video here. Yep, it's an earthquake. So let's see some other images here. Biggest earthquake since 1884, sending terrified residents into the streets. Yeah, we already saw the clip. Thank you, New York Post. Let's see if we can City officials quickly warned people of the danger of potential aftershocks, which began in the early afternoon in New Jersey, a report said. The preliminary 4.8 magnitude earthquake struck near Lebanon, New Jersey, not the country, around 10:23 a.m. and was potentially felt by more than 42 million people, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. So we have a whole chart here. See if we can. We have some other pictures and stuff. So terrified residents on the streets because of an earthquake. From here we don't see any damage, but who knows? I do know that some New York City buildings need, supervision because they're almost collapsing and stuff. That's also very interesting. We're going to look that up. NYC City building. We're going to show some images of building collapsing here. 3 months ago,
tonight, shocking new surveillance footage showing the moment a Bronx apartment building partially collapses. Another angle showing people run for safety as debris and dust cascades onto the ground below.
I heard like a big boom.
One neighbor, Shakira Almonte, recalling the horrifying moment she witnessed through her apartment window.
When I look outside, I just see people running.
Canines called in to search the rubble for anyone who may have been trapped. But the FDNY saying miraculously no one was severely injured, and that as of last night it had gone through a large pile of debris up to 12 feet high in spots and had found no victims.
So what's causing all
now investigators are focused on how this
what's causing all these collapses? Let's take a look at this one here.
For some people, they parked here.
So he's at a parking lot, which is almost collapsing.
This garage is about to collapse, and it's not alone.
Track service remains suspended between the city and Albany for a second day.
You can see through this hole in the parking garage at 524 West 51st Street. This is a lose-lose situation, both for drivers who cannot get their cars here and train commuters who are now stranded.
5-7 entry between William and Nassau. An explosion in a parking garage was collapsed.
Did it sound like a bomb going off, like something like a little explosion that happened?
Now, luckily, for the time being, disaster here has been averted. This particular garage was spared when someone saw how bad things were inside and alerted the authorities. The Department of Buildings has determined that the conditions within this premises are imminently perilous to life, and you can be arrested. And we're gonna check out a whole bunch of places like this. An actual parking garage collapse, a building that exploded, and a church that mysteriously burst into flames, and they're all here in New York. What if I ring the bell?
Track service remains suspended between the city and Albany for a second day. Authorities say it's all because of an unstable parking garage on West 51st Street in Hell's Kitchen.
Okay, the interesting thing with this garage is that it's right above a critical train tunnel that leads into the city, which means if this building collapses, it could actually collapse into the street beneath what we see right here. And as it turns out, the damage here is so bad that this is not going to be an easy fix.
You can see through this hole in the parking garage at 524 West 51st Street, train tracks below. The Department of Buildings says an engineer contracted by the property owner called 911 Friday.
You know, what's truly unbelievable about this is that this place fell into massive disrepair without anyone noticing until it was almost too late. Now, luckily, the owners knew something was up because they had people here investigating what was going on. All the while, people were parking their cars in here and trains were traveling underneath it. Do you hear that? I hear drilling and stuff in there. It sounds like they're working on fixing it. And this place was one phone call away from total disaster.
The DOB issued a vacate order, which means Icon parking customers like Allegra Torres haven't been able to access their vehicles since Friday.
Now, it has been a couple of weeks since these problems were discovered, and some of the cars have been removed from the garage, and the Amtrak service beneath the garage has been restored. But I'm sure some people, they parked here in the morning, they were going to leave their car here for the whole day, maybe even a couple of days, and the place got cleaned out, shut down, and their cars got trapped.
But early Sunday morning, Amtrak workers performing the installation found additional structural defects, including cracked and deteriorated steel beams.
And you gotta wonder, like, how long was it like this before someone said something? Was there a hole and the owners were like, yeah, we'll get around to it when we can? Was it something that was dealt with right away? It's really frightening to think that perhaps the people that are supposed to be looking out for what's inside may not have known about that immediately. And I don't actually know if these boards are here because of the construction work that's being done or if they were here already. And what's crazy is the true extent of the damage was only visible from the train tracks because those are beneath it. And that means nobody at Amtrak was checking the tunnel for structural damage either. They only realized once this place got called in. But let's be real, if this is the outside all rotting away like this with holes and stuff everywhere, I'm sure the inside wasn't much different. Look at those crazy old wires in there. That's nuts.
A deeper dive.
You see, America is spending a lot of money on warfare, right? Weapons towards Ukraine, attacking Afghanistan, attacking Iraq, attacking Libya, attacking Syria, sending weapons to Syria, and loads of cash. We remember the hostage, or not hostage, the people held captive in Tehran, the 5 U.S. people held captive in Tehran. There was an exchange, right? And they negotiated for 5 Iranian people in the U.S. and they basically switched, right? And they gave Iran a lot of money. You know, it's like, what the hell are you doing, Biden? You know, demented fool. So New York is crumbling and you guys are still waging war. I want to see, right, I'm talking to the U.S. audience and the international audience, of course, but I want to see a peace movement in the U.S., right? Because the U.S. is still the beacon of power within the Western world. I want to see a peace movement. There is one, Gerald Celente and others, Judge Napolitano are part of it. So there is a peace movement, but there needs to be more people involved, right? Because, you live in these buildings. These buildings can collapse whenever, man. I would not want to live in such a building, right? They need maintenance. So stop waging wars and do something about your infrastructure, right? Anyway, I think we said enough. There's so much else going on, right? We're also going to take a look at Senegal before we close off, because Senegal has a new president, and that president says bye to the French, which is very, very interesting. Yet another country within Africa who says bye to the French. Major challenges lie ahead for Senegal's new president. We're going to take a look at this here.
During his campaign, Bassirou Diomaye Faye promised change and freedom. Now, as Senegal's youngest president, he'll have to follow through, and he faces multiple challenges. In a country shaken by deep political rivalries, Faye has declared ensuring national reconciliation is his first priority.
We will work relentlessly and methodically on priority projects, the most important of which we consider to be national reconciliation and rebuilding the foundations of our way of life together.
Faye has already taken a first step on this path by meeting outgoing President Macky Sall last week. Sall provoked a political crisis in February by suspending the presidential vote weeks before its initial date, citing security concerns. It sparked protests and clashes that left at least 3 people dead. Another major task will be job creation. Official figures put the unemployment rate at 20% in a country where 3/4 of its 18 million people are under the age of 35. The situation is thought to be one of the factors pushing more young people to join the waves of migrants trying to reach Europe.
Have you seen all these young people going into the sea just to get to Europe? It's not normal. The country is rich. We have mineral resources. Frankly, we need to exploit these resources and manage them properly, and distribute the profit fairly.
Faye has pledged to restore Senegal's economic sovereignty, hoping to renegotiate oil and gas contracts. However, analysts doubt whether energy giants like BP and Woodside will agree to shrink their share of revenue. The new leader also wants to rely less on imports and notably invest more in agriculture to reach food self-sufficiency. Finally, there's fighting corruption. This is one task Faye can begin swiftly by creating a national financial prosecutor. He'll also have to decide whether to dissolve the National Assembly that was elected in September 2022, in which his party does not have a majority.
So we see that happening in Senegal, right? Richard Medhurst also talked about the president of Senegal. We're going to take a look at his channel. Here we go. And he was talking about the president of Senegal who said, it's time for France to go. So we're going to take a look at this here.
Senegal just elected a new president, and this man is not messing around. There he is, Bassirou Diomaye Faye. He is now Africa's youngest president. One of his policies is to withdraw Senegal from the CFA franc, this colonial currency that France imposed on its supposedly former colonies. And it forced these countries for many decades to put half of their money in the French central bank. He is very popular with the electorate, with the Senegalese youth, because the youth in Africa are switched on. They oppose France, they oppose colonialism and neocolonialism, and they want Africa for Africa. But I want to show you a member of his party who was actually imprisoned along with him not even a month ago. Okay, and I want to show you, his name is Ousmane Sonko, and I want to show you a speech that he gave. People have been posting this all around the internet thinking that this is the president, that this Mr. Sonko is the president. He's not the president, and I want you to listen to what he has to say.
It is high time for France to lift its knee off our neck and put an end to this unjust oppression. Centuries of misery, human trafficking, colonization, and neocolonization have caused immeasurable suffering. It's time to put an end to this cycle of oppression. It's high time for France to leave us alone. It's time for France to take a cue from its European neighbors and learn a valuable lesson in independence. Germany is the leading economic power in Europe, significantly surpassing France, which is ranked as the third or fourth largest economic power globally. Germany does not exploit any country, any colony. I can mention Italy, I can mention Spain, who had colonies before, but who do not exploit anyone, who do not interfere, who do not impose leaders in their former colonies. On what grounds does France believe it can continue to impose leaders on us and make choices on our behalf? This must come to an end. And the emerging Africa, the African youth, the African elites, and the African diaspora all stand united in saying no, it cannot continue any longer. France's hypocrisy is evident and pervasive in daily life. Let's examine the cases of Mali and Chad as prime examples of this hypocrisy. In Chad, where the constitutional process has been interrupted, France applauded and its president visited to officially consecrate the new king's coronation ceremony. In Mali, where it is not the constitutional process that has been interrupted, but the transition process, France has condemned and even packed up its things to say that it is leaving Mali. That's hypocrisy. It's the double standard. It is the double language that France employs in its dealings with Africa. During our questioning of Mr. Jean-Yves Le Drian regarding the situation in Ivory Coast and France's decision to allow a third term, he provided a clear explanation. He stated that while he accepted the third term for Ouattara, he refuses it for Belarus. He emphasized that France has condemned the situation in Belarus and has actively encouraged the European Union to do the same. Le Drian explains that in Belarus, millions protested, unlike Ivory Coast, where there were no mass demonstrations on the streets. This is how France deals with African issues. Personally, we expect absolutely nothing from France. We desire her to cease meddling in our matters so that the people of Senegal can exercise their freedom of choice rather than being influenced by France's selection of a candidate using the tactics we are aware of. We begin by targeting individuals, adorning them with the Legion of Honor or a similar knightly rank, enlisting them in Masonic lodges, and informing them to prepare themselves as they will be next in line. Even the hypothesis that Macky Sall may not succeed, we know who is being prepared by France. This must come to an end. It will not occur in this manner any longer. Let's be clear. We have absolutely nothing against the French people. In France, both political and citizen voices are rising to hold and express the same discourse as the one I'm currently presenting to you. For example, the deputies, such as Mrs. Frédérique Dumas, who regularly speaks on the platform of the Assembly, who regularly writes to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, since she is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, to raise this unfair behavior of France towards Africa, hold the same speech as us. The same Mr. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, Jean-Paul Lecoq, André Chassaigne, all deputies, hold the same discourse as us, and hundreds of other voices. The NGOs, like other non-profit organizations, are doing remarkable work in the same direction. We strongly urge France to listen to the voices that speak to it about our plan for a more collaborative, fairer, and sustainable partnership between Africa and France. It is crucial that we work together towards a future that is equitable, just, and environmentally conscious. If she listens, I believe we'll have beautiful days ahead in our collaboration together. If he does it, thinking he can continue to function like in the time of our grandfathers, this African youth no longer accepts it. France must make preparations for a definitive break and completely withdraw from Africa. Africa belongs to Africans, not France.
So there you have the president of Senegal repelling the French, So I think I've said enough for today. We will be back on Sunday, right? hopefully we'll see what happens. We're going to close off with Samson, who has a very cool rap, What About Us?
Don't drill on me. Those are words that I stand by, homie. It doesn't mean I'm gangster, it doesn't mean I'm country. It means that my life is in my hands only. I don't have money for security, I don't have armed guards that I keep snug around me. You don't think I deserve protection like you do, and that means you don't give a fuck about me. Gated community, that's what you live in. Hatred and mutiny, that's what we live in. So come down here and hang with us for a minute. See if you leave with the same fucking opinion. Who's gonna help me out if I get robbed? What if somebody were to beat up my mother? Who's gonna be there to save our lives? You? Nah, me, motherfucker. I'm the only one that's got my back. It's dog eat dog, these are not no cats. There's cops in Michigan that can't even respond to their calls because their cars ain't got no gas. Great. Police don't have any fuel. You don't know if they'll arrive when you call them. The babies are starving. My girlfriend can't find a tampon, and yet somehow you and I are the problem. Somehow. I've never bought a gun without having my background scanned and approved. The only loophole I've seen on a gun is the one that you put a fucking lanyard through. It's not true that you can go to the store and just swipe your card and get a Glock and run. It's funny, the people that say that shit have literally never even shot one. Dumbass. Hey, Matthew McConaughey. Shut the fuck up. Just cause you've murdered people on screen doesn't mean you know shit about guns, you dumb fuck. What, you're worried about us? What about all of those violent movies that you played? How about you go talk to Alec Baldwin before you start telling me what to do, okay? Uvalde, I was horrified by it. That's your hometown, you were born to buy it. It probably cuts deep and I hope that it does, cause you work in an industry that glorifies violence. It's more your fault than it will ever be mine. Lord only knows how many crimes that you've influenced throughout your whole career, cause I've seen you kill people plenty of times. What do you think is gonna cause a shooting? A YouTube video of a gun review? Or a Hollywood murder scene that seems so realistic it looks like it's from the news? So next time that you wanna point your finger with a stupid opinion and chime in with it, remember, it ain't me that they're trying to be like, dog. It's you that they're trying to mimic. I feel way more safe in a place where the people are legally armed. If something happens like a mass shooting, I have a way less chance of being lethally harmed. The criminal is gonna think twice if he knows everybody is a piece underneath their clothes. And Mayor Lightfoot will probably tell you different, but have you seen Chicago? And no, before you ask, I don't wanna be like Canada either. And I don't wanna be like Australia. I'm sick of everybody using them as humanity meter. There's a reason that they can do whatever they want to their citizens, like fucking throw them in camps. And there's a reason that our government didn't even try that shit, cause they know that they can't. If you don't think for one split second that if we didn't have our Second Amendment, the government wouldn't overstep its boundaries and make us do shit even when we're against it, you're out of your mind. I don't give a damn where you stand or how or what you vote. That's dandy and fine if you trust Uncle Sam, but I, for one, fucking don't. And why would I? What have they done? Give me a reason for me to believe them. They want to trade me a little security in exchange for a big-ass piece of my freedom. They don't want to take away guns because they care about you and they want to keep you safe at night. They want to take away guns because it's easy to control people if they don't have any way to fight. Hey, buddy, what your little AR-15 gonna do when the government comes to take it? Well, Ukraine started handing out rifles to all of the citizens when the Russians invaded, so what about that? I thought it wouldn't help. I guarantee that it'd be better than nothing. I hope it never does, but if the day comes, I bet that you're gonna wish that you had something. This is the only country on earth where the people have real strength. And nowadays, with all the shit going on, it's the only thing that makes me feel safe. If there's anything that I've learned in the past couple of years looking back at the pandemic, all of the shit that we have is fragile, and it could snap at any second. Fuck all of the politicians. I don't trust anything they say. Take the word gun out of gun control and that's all that it is at the end of the day. I don't give a fuck how crazy you think that I look or I sound when I say this shit, but our Second Amendment's the only thing that stands between us and a dictatorship. And as for the kids, I'm not a security expert, so I won't act like one. But I think that if we can send over $50 billion to Ukraine, we could surely spend that much, or more, or less, here in our own country to fortify our schools and make them more secure so that every kid can get an education safe and sound. Place several trained armed guards in every school across America. You know, real men who won't stand by for 45 minutes in the hallway while a shooting unfolds in front of their own eyes. And pay them well, too. There's veterans that need the work. Why not protect our kids the same way that we protect you? Politicians are protected by guns. Celebrities are protected by guns. Every important person that walks this earth is protected by a gun. But our kids, they're important. Just not as much as you.
This is what we're trying to prevent, right? Also a very good song, My Little Armalite. Yeah. Freedom, peace, and all the wars now. That's what we need. Thank you all for watching. See you guys next.